We are in conversation with Lynne Hollander Savio, the wife of the late Mario Savio, who founded the free speech movement on the UC Berkeley campus in 1964. Welcome, Ms. Hollander.
Thank you. I should point out that Mario was only one of the founders. This was a very group kind of activity. And so I wanted to say, since many people haven't heard of the free speech movement or don't know anything about it, it was at that time that in response to the university's discovering all of a sudden that they had never gotten rid of this strip at the entrance to the campus where people were used to putting up political activity tables and giving out information and signing up people to go on picket lines and so forth. And because there was a belief by the administration that the universities not being able to engage in political activity meant that the students couldn't engage in political activity on campus, which was a kind of a bizarre perspective. But in any case, they cracked down on the students, and the students resisted. And when they brought the police, well, they didn't quite bring the police onto campus. They threatened to bring the police onto campus. And the students negotiated an agreement to stop the trapping of the police car that we had engaged in when they tried to haul away one of the people who were sitting in. That led to several months of negotiations and bad faith by the university, and then gradual giving in until there was two things. The university dug in their heels about the role of advocacy and whether students could be penalized if a perfectly legal protest that they had encouraged turned out to become illegal, and somebody was arrested, and so they were probably going to win on that issue because it was a very difficult issue for students to understand. Although Mario talked about prior restraint and how that was making it difficult for people. But in any case, what the university did at that point was resurrect old disciplinary charges, which everybody on our side believed had been abandoned by the negotiations which ended the sit-in around the car. And so when they did that, which was obviously trying to pick off our leaders, we took over Sproul Hall and had a sit-in. So yeah, that is about the quickest I can explain it.
Absolutely. And several hundred of you were arrested.
Yeah, there were over 800 people arrested, mostly students. I should point out.
Were you also arrested, Lynne?
Yes, I was arrested. I should point out that a lot of the emotional impetus for these protests came from the civil rights movement, which was then at its height, both in the South and in Berkeley and San Francisco. And the students felt very strongly that the new regulations were aimed at stopping those kinds of activities, and that they were immoral, and therefore they had to be opposed.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about the experience in jail. How long did you spend there?
Well, I was there, let's see. Oh, gosh. can't really remember anymore. From the beginning, from the time I was hauled off, which was, you know, I can't remember now, whether I was hauled off in the morning, or the afternoon. And then we were taken to the Oakland City Jail for several hours, and then we were driven to Santa Rita.
Mhm.
And we had a inedible dinner, and it really was inedible.
Yeah.
We were very hungry, but it was not, you couldn't eat it. It was pasta with no sauce. It was just dry, wet spaghetti.
Wow,
And
you remember that? That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. And and then I think we got out about at early in the morning. I mean, like at 2 a.m. or something the next day. And the faculty had come to pick us up, which was nice.
Wow. Okay. And then what were the repercussions of that? Did you have to, were you released on your own recognizance or what
Oh,
happened?
well, yeah, well, let's see. Were we on our own recognizance? But no, the faculty paid, they raised a lot of money and they paid bail for us. And therefore we were released. And then um, the we didn't get, there was a trial,
Mhm.
a mass trial, and we weren't very satisfied with the defense that was put on. And then it took another long time, but around August, this was, I guess we went to trial in the spring, and in August, we were told what our penalties were, and they ranged. Had been a member of the executive committee, and so I had 30 days or $300. And because I was back east and because I was on my way to Mississippi at that point, I paid the $300. But a lot of people who had that kind of a deal went to jail for 30 days. And then people who were on the steering committee went for a good deal longer. And I forget what Mario's might have been 3 months, I think,
Wow.
something like that. And
Yeah.
Michael Rossman was in for the same amount of time, I think.
Yeah.
Various.
Absolutely. So, do you see remnants of the free speech movement in the actions that are taking place now on Columbia, campuses across the East Coast, and even here in California, uh, protesting our involvement in the Israel-Hamas conflict?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think there are a great many differences. Um, and there are similarities. I, for better or for worse, I think that people in this generation, well, let's see, this is 1924. Probably not. Historical memory in this country is so poor that they probably, but I mean, there has been a tradition. I mean, the FSM restarted a tradition on college campuses which existed back in the 30s, and then, was ended by the war and then by McCarthyism.
Mhm.
And so the 60s were just the resurrection of a buried tradition. And then from the 60s, that passed, I mean, from the civil rights movement, that passed into the anti-war movement. And I think at that point, people became, the tradition now became the sit-in. maybe too quickly the sit-in. We sat in after a rather long period of time, except for the one around the car. That was very spontaneous. So
Right, right. Interesting. Do you see parallels between what you all did at UC Berkeley and what's going on, as I mentioned, at Columbia, at
all right, the parallels are you have a great many students who feel a moral responsibility. Some of them feel the moral responsibility to try and stop the bombing of Gaza, which has been horrendous. Some of them are trying to assert the Palestinians' right to a country, to an independent country, which is also a moral cause. And some people are unable to get over being victims. And so in that sense, I think there's obviously much more of a conflict with the conflict between groups of students when we existed were between students who said, we approve of your goals, but not your methods.
mm.
And so we had sort of semi-agreement with us from everybody on campus. And it was just an argument about whether, breaking the law, breaking a regulation, or so on and so forth, was valid or not. That is not the situation here. And I have opinions about that, but
Please share your opinions about that.
yeah, my opinion about that is that there are two groups of people who never learned in kindergarten to share. And, maybe it was a mistake to put the Jews down in what had been Palestinian land for a long, long, long time. I mean, I think that the Jews were there at one point, but how far back in history can we go?
Right.
So, all right, there were Jews, there were Palestinians. I don't know how well they got along at the beginning, but in any case, whatever happened, because of the Holocaust and because of all the millions of displaced people from Europe, and because of the fact that the Western countries were not really thrilled about welcoming hordes of refugees from Southern Europe and Jews and so forth. Because of all that, there was a great deal of sympathy in 1948 to give the Jews a place to be, and Palestine seemed the obvious place because it felt like a homeland. And now, looking back at it, it was probably an error. They should have given them part of Germany. I mean, I don't know what, but part of Southern Europe. But they didn't. Now, it's been a long time. It's like asking the United States to give it back to the Native Americans. It's
Right.
not going to happen. Come on, guys, recognize reality, the reality that Israel is there and it has to stay there. And it has to stay, I think, a Jewish-led country because Jews will not trust anybody. There is no place that they have ever lived that they haven't been kicked out of or discriminated against or, had pogroms against them. So I understand there is an inherent distrust and suspicion and so forth that prevents a single state, I think. Although I'm not in principle, I don't love the idea of a single religious state, but there are a lot of them. I mean, England is Church of England, et cetera, et cetera. There are ones that are better and ones that are worse in terms of freedom and equal rights. But the people in the right wing of the Israeli government are, they also say from the river to the sea, except they mean get rid of all the Palestinians. It should be Israeli land. So to me, it's like neither side recognizes reality. And reality is that both of nor morality for that matter, which is that both places are there, whether they should have been there or not, both cultures are there, whether they should have been or not, they're there. And that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to stay. And they're going to kill each other if they don't accept that. And that's what they're doing at this point, except that the Israelis are stronger. So they're killing people.
Ms. Hollander, do you stand with the protesters at these universities today?
Well, well, first of all, I don't have the real opportunity to do that because I live out here in the boonies, and
right.
and I don't drive anymore. So, but if I lived in Berkeley or in the city, I would have a difficult time because I would join a peace demonstration. I would join a demonstration for a ceasefire, but I won't join a demonstration that is proclaiming, Palestinian rights unless it also is acknowledging, that the Jews in Israel have rights too. And, I've found Hamas appalling, their action. Horrifying. And I knew, although that at the time, I knew that Israel was going to respond. And although I did not think that was going to be productive, I knew they were going to respond. But oh my God, it just seems so out of proportion. And the fantasy that you can destroy Hamas by doing the things they're doing, when all they're doing is creating more and more hatred and more, all these children who, if they have managed to survive, their parents have been killed, their siblings have been killed. There's no way that, they might not call it Hamas, they'll call it something else. There's no way to stop that. And the government has to wake up to that fact. But, the Palestinians do too, if there are any of them left after all this. So it would be hard for me because I think that the voices that I represent are kind of drowned out in the shouts of both sides. And so, you can call me a wishy-washy liberal or something. but that's really how I feel. And I have to tell you that there are many people, because I'm on the board of the Free Speech Movement Archives, and there are many of us on that board who are secular Jews. And all of us, I think are, just deeply, deeply grieved and deeply torn by what is going on. And in the fact that we, I think, do not feel that the coverage by the press is fair, is accurate. I think that there's too much. I would doubt very much if the press has improved that much since the time it covered FSM. And there were a lot of inaccuracies. And there were, the thing that bothers me here is, it's always the most outrageous people that get highlighted. And there are many Jewish students that are in those encampments or supporting the encampments and so forth. But the only Jews they talk to are the Jews who are worried about being attacked and that the protesters are anti-Semitic. And I'm sure that I'm positive there are protesters who are anti-Semitic. And I'm positive that some things have been said and so forth and so on. But whether the overall tenor of the protests are that, I really don't know. And I am more dependent upon the people I know at NYU. I don't know people at Columbia, but I do know people at NYU. And I think that they have much more respect for the students. He has much more respect for the students than would be, the press deals with and the press expresses.
Absolutely. So 3 more questions and I'll let you go. Columbia University President Minouche Shafik decided to call in police and arrest a number of students. Can you comment on that and tie that back to
I think
your own arrest?
I think it is absolutely craven. I think it was a total capitulation to the Republicans that, they got into McCarthyism mode and I mean the whole thing with the other university presidents too. So she saw the handwriting on the wall. Oh, if I don't come down against the students, I'm going to be with, she should be standing up for academic freedom and for the freedom of her students to exercise their constitutional rights and their rights of free speech and not supporting this kind of squelching. And, I think it was appalling, and it was appalling of her to ignore the faculty. And I hope she's learned something from that, although I don't have much hope. And I mean, I will say that the university held out longer. And of California, the UC California. And, it was Reagan, I think, who said, oh, squelch them right away, sit them
Right.
right. And I think there were police who had recommended that to Ed Strong and Clark Kerr too. But wiser heads prevailed for a while. So anyway, what was the question you asked?
Well, I was going to ask it to you to relate it back to your own experience of being arrested.
Being arrested. Yeah, I think that I understand the NYU arrests were handled very carefully. And the students behaved very well and the police behaved very well. And I don't know if that was true at Columbia. It wasn't really true with our arrests, for people who didn't get up and walk. If they stayed limp, they got pretty much thrown down the stairs,
Mm.
or slid down the stairs. But there were also no serious injuries, really. So,
Interesting. Final question. If your late husband was alive today, if Mario Savio was alive today, what advice do you think he would give to the protesters?
I think he would say, let all the voices be heard. I think that it's distressing when either the Jews or the Palestinians on campus stop, or the contributors stop the expression of different voices, whether they're pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian or pro-human. And I think those voices should have been allowed to speak. I think Zionist Jews should be allowed to speak. And I think anti-Zionist Jews should be allowed to speak. Mario believed that free speech was like the absolute essence of what a human being is, and he did not believe in curbing it. And he also believed in time, place, and manner regulations, and that's what we accepted, and that's what was accepted at Berkeley. Though they have at times, I mean, like with Occupy and with the anti-apartheid movement, been rather ignored. But that's students.
Anything you'd like to add before I let you go?
No, just that this is a horrible, tragic situation, and I don't see anything much good coming out of any of it.
Well, all right. Well, thank you for the conversation.